Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about overtraining, or at least we're going to be talking about some myths surrounding overtraining. And of course, you may as well get ready because I want to hear from you. I want to know if you have ever found yourself in the overtraining zone. Or maybe that's not fair, because I think overtraining, it's a lot more rare than we think it is. But if we do train too much, there are some downsides. So I suppose what I'm asking is, have you suffered any negative effects from training too much? I am going to want to hear that, but stay for the rest of the video. Yes, that was a very rambling start, but let's get into it. Okay, thanks for sticking through the intro. And I did come across an article in sci-fi.net. Yeah, that's it. And the article is titled 5 Overtraining Myths Explained by Science. Of course, I will place a link in the show notes below in case you want to just click on that article and go and give it a read. And if you are interested in like some of the science behind overtraining, you are definitely going to want to check out this article because there are a lot of embedded links in this article. And I am not going to be getting into all those links. We're just going to be painting with a very broad brush. Oh, and before we get into it, just so you know, I found out that I did get into the Tokyo Marathon with a charity bib. And what that effectively means is that I pledged to raise a certain amount of money. And for those of you that are wondering, I have pledged to raise $2,100, or maybe just under that with the Japanese yen conversion, but around $2,100. And as of the making of this video, which is actually only 2 days before you guys are watching this video, but as of the making of this video, you all have donated $392. Let me just do a quick calculation. That's 19.6% already. So thank you to each and every one of you that have donated so far. I really appreciate you. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's talk about overtraining and the first myth around overtraining. And I don't know anyone that watching this video that really believes in this myth, but the first myth apparently is that overtraining doesn't exist. And that is probably because of old-timey ways of thinking, the whole thing that more is better, no pain, no gain, gotta push yourself to the limit. And the article also says that people say that there is no such thing as overtraining, only under recovery. And actually, on the surface, that kind of makes sense. I mean, not the no overtraining part. Obviously, overtraining is in a big part due to not recovering enough and not letting yourself recover. But I think we're going to get more into that. Anyway, overtraining is also known as overtraining syndrome and burnout. And this part is actually quite disturbing. That there are some coaches out there that don't believe in overtraining. And it's probably just because they haven't experienced it, but also I'm sure some coaches have thought to themselves, is it overtraining or is it just work ethic? You're not able to make those splits. You're not able to push as hard as the coach thinks you're able to do. And then she thinks you're just, you're just phoning it in, when in fact, you could be overtrained. You could be experiencing overtraining syndrome. Well, I'm sure I'm not telling any of you anything new, but overtraining does exist. And very basically, it's when you push your body too hard for too long. And what happens when you push your body too hard for too long? Well, it won't be able to keep up and things will start to break down. In practice, this is going to present as a lack of physical performance and fatigue. I imagine a lot of fatigue. So there are two things that lead to overtraining. And the first one, pretty obvious, it's the training part, intense training every single day. I mean, that is just an example. I don't think you'd have to train every single day, but training too hard too often. And then 2, under recovery. So you're not getting enough food, nutrition, you're not getting enough rest. And that includes all kind of rest, physical rest, mental rest. And the article points out, and this is actually quite interesting, but you need to do all of these things for several months, maybe even years, before overtraining starts to develop. So if you've been pushing yourself for a couple of days, you don't have to worry. Probably not going to lead to overtraining, as long as you know when to pull back and take a nap. And of course, make sure you're fueling yourself sufficiently, which I think is the most fun part of training. Now, I did just say that, when you push yourself, that is one of the elements, or when you push yourself too much, that's one of the elements of overtraining. But the second myth surrounding overtraining is that it only happens when you exercise. It's not true. Overtraining is all going to be relative. So let's just think that you have a lot of stress in your life. You're going through a time of life and you're just overly stressed, right? If you are not managing that stress correctly, so again, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not resting, you're not recovering from daily life, letting your mind calm down, kind of de-stressing. Even if you're not pushing yourself physically to the brink every single day, that stress and that lack of recovery can still lead to overtraining. Now, it should be noted that excessive exercise is the #1 way to develop overtraining. And that's because exercise is extra. We don't have to exercise, right? We choose to do it. And if we choose to do it too much, that is taking a toll on our body. Just know that it's not the only way to be overtrained. So getting to that overtraining point, we already said, doesn't happen overnight. There are several steps that we have to go through before we actually get to be overtrained. And in all likelihood, most of us are probably not going to get there, but it's still good to know the science. So let's start off with normal training. Normal training is when we're training, like we're taxing our body, but we're also taking sufficient rest in order to recover from these workouts. Next, we've got overreaching. Now, overreaching, that is where growth happens. Right? We push ourselves a little bit more, and as long as we recover, we are going to kind of take a step forward in our fitness. You know, this overreaching is the type of training that's happening when we go out for a tempo run or we go and run intervals. It's also going to be seen in some training plans where you build up and then you have a setback week. And a lot of you that have a coach are probably going to see this. You're going to build up, maybe do a long run, and then you're going to have a week off. Not just a week off just eating bonbons on the sofa, but a week off with just less mileage. And then you're going to build up from there, and it's kind of going to be a step where eventually we're going to reach peak fitness. This gradual step and increase in fitness that comes with overreaching and then recovering and then overreaching again is called supercompensation. Okay, so we know what overreaching is now. Now there is non-functional overreaching. And this is probably, I don't know, I'm going to say the biggest nightmare. That could be an exaggeration, but it's, you know, it's not ideal for someone that is trying to be their best at something. And what happens with non-functional overreaching is that you do the same workouts. So you work out really hard, but then instead of taking a break, instead of kind of backing off the gas to let your body recover from that overreaching, you don't. Maybe you level off for a minute, or maybe you just don't take your foot off the gas and you just try and build that fitness in a linear fashion. And we all know fitness doesn't come linearly. It isn't linear. And look, at this point, you start losing fitness. Even though you're putting in the work, you start losing fitness. And that has to be very frustrating. And I know for a fact because I have definitely got there. And the article says that you're going to reach this point if you keep overreaching. So you keep kind of training beyond your capacity or training at a very high level for 3 to 4 weeks. Then you may reach that non-functioning overreaching stage. So if you're noticing some regression in your training, just take a look at your recovery. That could be it. And of course, you know this, and we all know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway that balance is key. I mean, isn't that true with everything in life? Yes, balance is key. And of course, there is a risk reward. You know, we have to risk, we're kind of toeing the line when we start training a little more, but the reward, hopefully, is running a faster time or getting fitter. But remember the old adage, the old race day adage. It is better to be 10% undertrained than 1% overtrained. Okay, quickly moving on to myth number 3. There is a definite sign of overtraining, and that is not true. It's a myth. That's why it made this list. So ultimately, there are several signs of overtraining. We have persistent fatigue, decreased athletic performance, unstable mood, problem sleeping. And if you have all 4 of those, then, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are overtraining, but it doesn't not mean that you're not overtraining. Doesn't not mean. That's a double negative. But it doesn't not mean that you're overtraining. That's what I'm trying to say. So if I look at me, because I'm the only one in here right now to ask, but I have experienced persistent fatigue. I have experienced decreased athletic performance, definitely. I have certainly experienced sleep problems, although saying that, I don't know if my sleep problems are due to like my fitness, my working out. It seems like every once in a while I just go through a time with some sleep problems and I can't sleep. And of course the last is an unstable mood. I think I'm pretty stable. I don't think I've ever had an unstable mood. Of course my wife would probably be the one to ask about that, but we're not going to call her in and quiz her on this. We're just going to have to take my word for it. Now of course we do have those other things, and you're wondering, well, Matt, is there a scientific way to measure overtraining? And yes, there have been some studies that have suggested that cortisol or heart rate variability can predict overtraining, or not predict, but identify overtraining. Researchers have also tried measuring a ratio of testosterone and cortisol, but it is not a reliable way to measure overtraining, right? The same applies to heart rate measurements. So just because you have a persistently high heart rate, that doesn't mean that you're overtraining. I mean, it could, but it doesn't show that you are. The 4th myth is that anyone can become overtrained. And immediately my first thought when I read this sentence, that anyone can become overtrained, is that, yeah, it's true. Like if anyone pushes themselves too much, they can potentially become overtrained, right? That has face validity. But no, I am part of the problem. Even when confronted with an article that is telling me that this is a myth, I'm still kind of trying to argue that it's possible. Anyone can become overtrained. And I suppose the point is that yes, there's a possibility, but it's very unlikely that any of us are going to become overtrained, because as we mentioned earlier, it's usually the elite athletes that are most likely going to experience overtraining. And that's because with an elite athlete, they are constantly toeing that line. They are performing at a high level all the time. And of course, it does depend on the sport. And this is going to come as no surprise, but endurance athletes are much more likely to experience overtraining than, say, a strength athlete, like a bodybuilder. Now look, if you are just a strength person and all you do is go to the gym and you lift weights, first of all, I wonder how you kind of stumbled across a running-based channel. But second of all, there isn't much scientific evidence to support bodybuilders becoming overtrained. However, if they are competing, there definitely is, because when bodybuilders are competing, they are putting in the work, and then they're probably not eating enough because they might be trying to cut weight, just to get a little extra toned. That is where overtraining can likely happen, because again, it's coming down to recovery. And the fifth myth to overtraining is that, who cares? You can get over overtraining very quickly. Overtraining. No. In fact, getting over overtraining can take months, and in some cases it can take years. And there is a little link next to where it says that it can take years. So if you want that scientific evidence of recovering from overtraining taking years, go ahead and click on the article and you can read through that to your heart's content. But anyway, in a nutshell, it takes a long time, right? You don't just go to bed one night and take a day off and you're recovered from overtraining. No, it definitely takes weeks, it can take months, and in extreme cases, it can take years. So there is a chart in the article, and it says that if your time to recover is less than a week, then you are just training, normal training. If you need 1 to 2 weeks to recover, you are functionally overreaching. If it takes 2 to 4 weeks to recover, you are non-functionally overreaching. And if it takes more than 4 weeks to recover, you are overtraining. I suppose that kind of means that for a lot of us, if we run a marathon, we could potentially be overtraining when we're running that marathon, because it does take several weeks to kind of get back to normal. And I know that even after a marathon, let's say I go back and I run the next week, I am still feeling the effects of that marathon several weeks after. What do you think about that? Is like millions of people every year overtraining with a marathon? No, obviously not. Or at least it's not technically overtraining. But it takes a lot of work to run a marathon. We do have to make sure we're paying attention to our recovery. Okay, thanks for making it to this point in the video. Now look, if you have made it to this point in the video, I want you to drop the thermometer emoji in the comments, just so I know that you've made it till this point in the video. And the thermometer is obviously because, earlier I put a thermometer on the screen with my fundraising goal and what I've actually raised. So that's the reason for the thermometer. Oh, and I will put that link in case you want to donate, in case you have made it to the end of this video and you want to donate. That really makes you a rock star. But I will place that link in the show notes below, and maybe I'll pin it to the top comment just to make it easy for you to donate if you choose to. Really, no pressure. All right, that's it for now. It's Matt B. This has been a video on the myths of overtraining. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.